When podcast recording goes wrong. SureTake's file recovery and backup explained. So it's one of the worst things that could happen. You schedule a guest, maybe a high profile guest, do a podcast interview with them, you record it, something goes wrong, and at the end, you don't have the files. You don't have the recording. It's completely lost. It's gone forever. We don't ever want to hear that type of thing happening. And although we can engineer and design the recording platforms to be as robust and reliable as possible, when you're dealing with variables like the internet, people's computers, things can just go wrong sometimes. So at SureTake, we have done our very best to ensure that at the very least you get something and no recording is ever completely lost. Today I want to run through how the file recovery and backup works with SureTake and what we've done to actually help ensure that your recordings of your podcast interviews and episodes are always safe. So first, let's talk a little bit about how SureTake actually works. There are essentially two parts to it. You've got the actual call, so what's letting you hear and see the guest or other guests in the room. You can all talk together in real time. There's that part of it, but that is a lower quality visual. When you look at that during the call, you'll see it's not very good quality. That's because it's compressed to help conserve bandwidth and help it work in real time over the internet in a way that higher quality files would be much more difficult to do with. It would just get crazy and be much less reliable and not good. So we use that call portion to connect everyone and have the conversation, but what actually happens is each person has an individual high quality file being recorded at the same time. And that's being uploaded to the remote servers, and that's what you get afterwards on your file area with your recording, the individual files for each person. Those are the high quality files. Now, when everything goes according to plan, you gracefully hit stop on the recording, everybody in the room's files upload, which you can watch from the indicator. They all have good internet connections. You have no problems. That's an ideal scenario. That's how it should typically work. So the first line of defense there is just making sure no one closes the tab early or you close without hitting stop on the recording, that kind of thing. And we have warnings in place to notify you of that. So that's kind of step one of how the SureTake system works to help keep your recordings safe. Now, beyond that, we have acts of the internet gods where things can just go wrong. The internet drops out, someone's computer completely crashes or their browser tab crashes, those sorts of things. What happens in those scenarios? Well, a few things. First of all, this is all per machine, per computer. So if you're a host and your guest's file or their recording crashes, their browser crashes, your file should still be perfectly fine, and it's only theirs that we're kind of concerned about at this point. SureTake will give you some very clear prompts and messages on the screen to let you know what's going on. It could be, there is a grace period, first of all, for that person to return. If it was just a quick internet drop, they can come back. It can actually pick things up, in some cases, just fine. If SureTake thinks that's not a good idea and it's better to just stop and start a new session, it will tell you that. So depending on what actually happens with the guest or you, as the host, that will affect how you're actually presented with different options and what the recovery options are and what SureTake will actually do to get things back for you. So as I mentioned, those high quality files for each person get uploaded during the call in the background. And so long as everyone has a good internet connection, that's usually not a problem. They'll be uploading at a good speed and no issues. If someone has a bit of a slower internet connection, then that has to kind of be put on the back burner to maintain the call. So by the end of the interview, they may have built up a little more of a bigger file on their machine that hasn't been uploaded yet, and they may take a little bit longer at the end for that upload to complete. That's perfectly fine as well. Where we may run into trouble is there's a bit of a gap between what is already uploaded and what hasn't been uploaded. It's usually not a big amount so long as their internet connection is good, but particularly worse on a slower internet connection if we at any time have a bigger piece of the file that hasn't been uploaded. If that user were to experience a crash at some moment, that's more of their high quality file that is now not uploaded safely. Now, even with the best internet connection, if we did have some kind of drop, we would lose that little bit of the last piece. It's always going to be a bit of a gap, but not too bad. If you can salvage most of their high quality file, then that's pretty good. But there is some positive news here because we have another way to recover things that we can attempt. Let's say your guest drops off, their browser crashes. So it's not just a disconnect that stops the call, but their browser actually crashes and a little bit of the end of their current high quality recording didn't get uploaded. What you start with is that incomplete file. So you can see this session here in front of me, Flaky Francine, her browser crashed. She left early in the session and her file is actually shorter. There's a bit missing at the end. That's a shame, but what we can actually do is give Francine the file recovery link. And what this does, it can actually go back in the browser. She will have to open it in the same browser and the same computer, of course, that she was recording in. The file remnants, the rest of it should be there. It can upload and you can actually get that back, the rest of it. As I said, it's normally not a huge portion anyway, so long as the internet connection was good, but this can definitely come in handy. Sometimes for other reasons, more of the upload can flake and not work. And being able to go back and retrieve it from the browser is really important. So here, like I said, if it was the guest, you can copy this recover link and send this over to your guest and have them open it. So let's pop this in here. See what happens. Okay, so it's found a recording here and it's uploading right now. So that's really good news that you're able to obtain hopefully the rest of the high quality file for your guest. What you will see, okay, you can see here already we're actually getting a second file for Francine showing up. That's because the system has detected this recovery and it's going to then analyze and process that file and see what we've got. If for some reason the recovery failed or she opened that in her browser and the file wasn't there, then you would go ahead with this here, and use what you've got, and at least it's something. And then how do we recover the last bit that's actually missing? What do we do there? That would be the same process we'd follow if we had nothing. For some crazy reason, the host and the guest, or something went completely disastrous, nobody got any files. You've always got this combined backup here. Now, what's that about? Well, that is generated from the call. So the downside with it is subject to the call quality. If someone's internet connection isn't very good, their video quality is going to suffer, perhaps the audio as well, and that's recorded into the call. So that's unfortunate, but remember, this is just a backup. It's better than nothing. So at the very least, I feel personal responsibility to make sure that recordings don't get lost. At the very least, you should always have this combined backup. So this is a very robust thing to just assure that you have something. Even if we have to take the last little bit of the combined backup and stitch it onto a higher quality file, at least you have the high quality for the rest of the episode. So there's options like that, and that's the reason that this all exists. Now we can see that we've actually got this new Flaky Francine file. It's a little longer, so you can see there was 8 seconds that we actually recovered by doing it this way. I used a little short sample recording, so the numbers are kind of not real world, but you get the idea. And now you may be wondering why my track, because I stayed in the session, mine is longer. That's because she dropped off and I was still recording after Francine left. So that's why mine's still going to be a little longer, but we've got pretty much what should be her entire high quality recording now. So we have recovered that. Very good. As I've said, the whole premise behind SureTake is to be reliable, because I've been working in podcasting for a long time. I've seen heartbroken podcasters who have to deal with this, where they record a great interview and it's gone, or something is messed up, the file won't download, they have to contact support. I'm really trying to avoid that. As I said, we can't control every variable in the world, so there's only so much we can do. But I did make some concessions in the design of SureTake to keep it simple and reliable as possible. So certain things like we record up to 1080p currently and not 4K. The browser requirements, we are very strict about what browser you can record in. You cannot use mobile phones. That's because, like I said, I take personally the responsibility that you're going to get the files that you needed out of that recording. If you ever run into a situation like this, the first thing you can do, as this suggests here, is just wait at least a half an hour, because the system in the background might be auto-recovering things, processing files, whatever it has. So it may need some time first. If you or your guest, like I said, dropped off, try the recovery tool. Go to that link in the corresponding browser on the same computer and see if it's got something to recover. That's great. If none of that works and you still seem to be missing part of a high-quality file, you can hit the Contact Us button, get in touch, and we will take a look behind the scenes to see if there's any additional way to recover it. And then finally, as I mentioned, as a very last resort, you should always have a combined backup that will at least save you from losing your recording completely. It is all quite robust. If you're doing a solo recording, SureTake will actually let you record through an internet drop up until a certain point. That's more possible there because if you don't have a guest to communicate with online, then it's not as important to have that live connection. But it will give you a bit of time, even in an interview, for the user to reconnect. And if they don't, then it will say, okay, it's safer to just stop this now, and we'll start a fresh one when you get the guest back. So that's the way to do it. Thank you for trusting SureTake. I do appreciate that you put your trust in us and know that we're doing everything we can here to make sure that your recordings are always safe.